Hey everybody, welcome to The Bottom Line. I'm Michael Noland. Tonight's video, we're going to be talking about Pink Floyd. You know, Pink Floyd is like any other major band in rock and roll that was reliant on their membership to truly produce their best output. Now, of course, with Pink Floyd, I'm talking about the membership of Roger Waters, David Gilmour, Richard Wright, and Nick Mason. Of course, before that, they had Syd Barrett, and their output for what they were at that time was magnificent, pre-David Gilmour. And it's from that point on where the band really translated to rock fans in general. Of course, with the amazing guitar playing and to a degree writing ability of David Gilmour, they were set to rock with the very best bands at the time. And of course, with Roger Waters as a songwriter, especially as a lyricist, it seemed for a while that the band could do no wrong. But what about Nick Mason? A lot of people say Nick Mason isn't that great of a drummer. I don't know where they get that idea, because I feel Nick Mason was the perfect drummer for Pink Floyd. His style fit that band like a T. And of course, that leads us to Richard Wright, who has sadly passed away. Rest in peace, Richard. But a lot of people, including Roger Waters, didn't think that Richard Wright was the most prolific member of Pink Floyd. Now, the first time I actually saw Pink Floyd, you know, besides seeing them in photographs and things like that, is when they released their movie, originally entitled Pink Floyd, then Pink Floyd Live, and then Pink Floyd Live at Pompeii. Of course, they have just recently released the album Pink Floyd at Pompeii. I think this is one of Pink Floyd's better albums. Yes, it is only a soundtrack for the most part to that movie. But watch that movie, listen to this album, and tell me that Richard Wright did not have a whole lot to do with Pink Floyd's success. Which gets me to the three albums I wanted to talk about tonight. And of course, these albums are albums that were produced at a time that Roger Waters had a problem with Richard Wright, and it started right with, well, it actually started before that, but really came to a fore with Pink Floyd's The Wall album. Now, a lot of you would consider this to be one of Pink Floyd's very best album, and I would agree with you that it contains some of Pink Floyd's very best work. There is no doubt about it. But I gotta tell you, as I listened to this album, I felt that there was a ton of filler on this album. An album that was heavily controlled by Roger Waters, with some of the other band members not caring for exactly where they were going musically. That's not to cut this album down in any way. When it's brilliant, it's brilliant. But when it's boring, it can be a bit of a snooze fest. Now, right after this album, Pink Floyd produced The Final Cut. All right, a lot of you would say, well, that's not even really a Pink Floyd album. First of all, they got rid of Richard Wright. He's not on this album. There's a couple of great solos by David Gilmour, but that's about all you hear from either Gilmour or Mason on this album. This might as well be a Roger Waters solo album, and by the way, not one of his best. Having said that, this is Pink Floyd. There is stuff to listen to on this album. There is great material here, but overall, I've got to tell you, this has got to be my least favorite Pink Floyd album of them all, including Endless River, which should have never been released. But at least sonically, Endless River has some very interesting ideas where this album just seems to plod on from one track to another. There's very few dynamic changes between songs. Rather, it's one dirge after another. David Gilmour, Nick Mason, and Richard Wright would continue to produce at least 2 albums after he left. One was a momentary lapse of reason. The other was this album, The Division Bell. You kind of got to wonder who was the weak link in Pink Floyd. Roger Waters would say that was always Richard Wright, and he had a problem working with the man. And there may have been some truth that Richard Wright would back off too early and not confront him, and perhaps not even offer as much material at certain points in the band's career. But when you listen to The Division Bell and compare it to the final cut, I hear an album that comes much closer to Wish You Were Here, Dark Side of the Moon, and at least half of The Wall, as well as their wonderful album Animals. But it doesn't matter whether you like or dislike any of these albums that I have chosen to share with you today. What I would like to hear from you is, when was Pink Floyd at their very best? In other words, were they at their best with Syd Barrett and didn't ever need David Gilmour to begin with? Or did they become the Pink Floyd that we all know and love with the addition of David Gilmour? Or were they even better once they got rid of Richard Wright? Because I got to tell you, in the end, as good as I like The Division Bell, and as much as I dislike the final cut, I see a band that needed all 4 core members after Syd Barrett left the band. And who knows what they might have become if Syd Barrett had stayed along once they had brought David Gilmour along as a guitarist. In the end, what was it that made Pink Floyd one of rock and roll's very best band? A band that would be compared to the likes of the Beatles and Led Zeppelin, as well as Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, and the other heavy contenders of classic rock. Was it all Roger Waters, or was it Syd Barrett at the beginning and they never recovered? Because I know a lot of you out there are major Syd Barrett fans and have missed him ever since he left the band. For me, I got interested in Pink Floyd once David Gilmour was in, and I happen to believe that Pink Floyd, in order for it to be at its very best as a band, had to include Roger Waters, David Gilmour, Richard Wright, and Nick Mason. Somehow, the 4 of them really pulled this off. All right, folks, that's the video for tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. That always helps. And if you haven't joined the channel yet, that's easy. All you have to do is hit that subscribe to the tribe button, tap that top bell icon, and you'll be notified of all my future videos, my future shorts, everything. You get the whole shebang. All right, folks, I hope you're having a great week, and I hope that you're looking forward to a relaxing weekend. We'll see you on my next video. But always remember this one last little tidbit, folks. We are the tribe.